The air conditioning in the conference room bites at my bare arms, a cold, sterile shock against the frantic heat churning inside me. I sit perfectly still, hands clasped tight in my lap, knuckles white. Across the polished table, he's smiling, a loose, confident smile that's always been able to charm the world, and apparently her too. She's beside him, radiating a nervous energy I can almost feel from here, smoothed over by forced composure. The lawyer is shuffling papers, his voice a low drone I barely register. This room, this moment, feels suspended outside of time, bathed in the unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights. They haven't seen me yet. I arrived early, slipped in through a side door I noted on my scouting trip, just like the lawyer instructed. Sat in the chair he designated. Invisible. For now. My heart pounds a frantic, silent rhythm against my ribs. Every detail is burned into my mind. The cheap landscape print on the wall, the water carafe already sweating condensation, the way the blinds are angled just so, slicing the harsh light into strips across the table. He reaches over and briefly touches her hand. A small, intimate gesture. The kind he used to do to me. A gesture confirming the reality I've been drowning in for months. He's here to sign the papers, to buy a future I thought we were building, but with her. Using money we earned, hopes we shared. He thinks he's safe. He thinks this is his victory lap. The lawyer clears his throat, ready to begin. And I unclasp my hands, the tiny sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence only I can hear. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Our life together wasn't a fairy tale, not by a long shot, but it felt sturdy. Like a good, well-built house. Layers added over time, weathering storms, a place where you felt safe to just be. We had routines, comfortable silences, inside jokes that had aged like fine wine. We talked about the future in that quiet, certain way people do when they believe they have forever. Retirement spots, hypothetical grandchildren, the perennial dream of a little place by the water, nothing grand, just somewhere we could hear the waves and watch the sun go down. He worked hard. I worked hard. We built something. Or I thought we did. I invested everything I had, my time, my energy, my dreams, my very identity, into us. I was the foundation, the load-bearing walls, the roof over our heads, both figuratively and literally, managing the household, the finances, the logistics of simply existing side by side for 18 years. He was the facade, the windows looking out, the door greeting the world. I don't know anymore. I used to think he was the other half of the foundation. The first crack was tiny, almost imperceptible. A late night at work that stretched into 2, then 3 a week. Standard stuff, right? Everyone works hard. Then the phone became an extra limb, clutched tight, notifications silenced. He'd take calls in the other room, his voice low, hurried. I'd walk in, and the call would end abruptly, followed by a quick, unconvincing explanation. A client, a colleague, always plausible, always just enough to quiet the little voice starting to whisper in the back of my head. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriage isn't a prison. People need space. I trusted him. Trust was the bedrock, wasn't it? Without trust, the whole structure collapses. I clung to that bedrock. But the whispers grew louder. They became shouts in the silence of our bedroom after he'd fallen asleep, the phone still clutched in his hand, face down on the pillow. The air between us thickened with things unsaid, things I didn't want to say, didn't want to make real by acknowledging. He became absent. Not just physically, but mentally. His eyes would be distant, his responses automatic. He'd be scrolling on his phone while we ate dinner, while I tried to tell him about my day, while the life we built together was happening right in front of him. He was living another life somewhere else. The inciting incident, the moment the first wall truly crumbled, wasn't dramatic like in movies. There was no tearful confession, no angry accusation. It was quiet, mundane, and utterly devastating. I was paying bills online, something I always handled. I logged into our joint savings account to transfer funds. And I saw it. A large, unexplained withdrawal. Then another. And another. Not huge amounts individually, but adding up. And labeled vaguely, investment, consulting fee, project expense, but they weren't linked to anything we had discussed, any project I knew about, any investment advisor we used. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just distance anymore. This was clandestine. Financial secrets in a marriage built on shared everything? That was a different kind of betrayal. That was dismantling the house brick by brick. I didn't confront him. Not yet. The little voice screaming now. But another voice, colder, quieter, told me to wait.
To see.
To know for sure. Confrontation without proof is just noise. And if I was wrong, I'd shatter the trust one was desperate to believe still existed. If I was right, I needed armor. And knowledge was the only armor I had. So began the early struggles. My normal life became a performance. Every morning I'd put on a brave face, make coffee, discuss the weather, like the solid roof was still firmly overhead. Inside, I was a demolition zone. I started staying up late, ostensibly working, but really poring over bank statements, credit card bills, anything that might offer a clue. It felt dirty, invasive, and utterly necessary. Every transaction was a breadcrumb, leading me through a dark forest I never knew existed. The money transfers grew more frequent, larger. They seemed to be going to different places, but I noticed a pattern. They often coincided with his late nights or weekend business trips. I started cross-referencing dates, times, amounts. It was like piecing together a complex, painful puzzle where every piece confirmed my worst fears. He wasn't just having an affair. He was funding it. He was building something with her using our resources. The house we'd built together, our financial security, it was all being plundered. The emotional toll was immense. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford or couldn't achieve. My appetite vanished. I'd catch my reflection and barely recognize the gaunt, hollow-eyed woman staring back. The tension was a constant physical ache in my chest, behind my eyes. Simple conversations with him felt like navigating a minefield. Every word, every glance, every innocent question I asked about his day, I was scanning for lies, for inconsistencies, for any flicker of the man I thought I married. It was exhausting, soul-crushing work. I was living a double life, the dutiful wife by day, the secret investigator by night. Then came the first solid lead, not just financial. A hotel bill. Not from a city he claimed to be in for a conference, but one an hour away. A small boutique hotel. And a credit card charge from a local restaurant near that hotel. On a night he was supposedly working late, the restaurant wasn't a business place. It was known for its intimate atmosphere, its quiet corners. The picture sharpened, becoming cruelly clear. He wasn't just having late nights at the office. He was having late nights with her. In another town. The rising challenges multiplied. My investigation got harder. He became more careful. Bank statements started coming as e-statements, encrypted. Credit card bills were redirected to his work email. He cleared his phone history religiously. It was like he sensed my quiet probing, or maybe his guilt just made him more cautious. Or maybe she was making him more cautious. The thought of her, whispering in his ear, coaching him on how to hide things from me, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I felt increasingly isolated.
How do you talk about this?
To friends? To family? How do you say, the man I've spent nearly 2 decades with is systematically dismantling our life to build a new one with someone else, and I'm acting like everything is fine while I try to prove it. The shame was a heavy cloak. It felt like my failure, my naivety. How could I have been so blind? So trusting? I started pulling away from people, becoming more insular, burying myself deeper in my secret war. The house. The house became the central figure in this twisted drama. I found it by sheer persistence, cross-referencing property records, linking vague addresses from wire transfers to real estate listings, digging through online public databases until I found a property purchased recently, or pending purchase, with financing linked to his name, but listed under a shell company or AP, a box address he'd secretly set up. It took weeks, poring over dry documents late into the night, my eyes burning, my mind racing, fueled by caffeine and cold fury. When I found the address, it was like a physical blow. I pulled it up online. It wasn't the little place by the water we dreamed of. It was modern, sleek, in an affluent neighborhood I knew he admired but always said was too much for us. Too much for us, but not too much for him and her. The pictures online showed pristine rooms, a landscaped yard, perfect and impersonal. It wasn't a home. It was a transaction. A status symbol. A monument to their betrayal. A morbid curiosity. A desperate need to make it real, to see what he was sacrificing us for, drove me there one rainy afternoon. I parked down the street, the car feeling like a flimsy shell against the storm brewing inside me. I watched the house from a distance. It was just bricks and glass, but it felt alive with their secret. I imagined them inside, planning their future, laughing, perhaps talking about me, pitying the wife they were leaving behind. The thought was a venomous bite. I saw her car parked in the driveway one day. I saw her walk out, a silhouette against the porch light. Then he joined her. He put his arm around her shoulder, and they walked to the car together, disappearing into the night. I sat there, hidden in the dark, the rain blurring my vision, and felt something inside me snap. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was cold, pure rage. Rage at his deceit, her audacity, my own wasted years, my own blindness. This wasn't just about a house. It was about our history, our shared life, being erased, replaced, literally bought out from under me. He wasn't leaving me. He was liquidating me. Using the assets of our life together to build a new one he had no intention of including me in. This wasn't a messy affair. This was calculated, systematic destruction. And sitting there, cold and wet, and watching them drive away in the dark, I knew I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't just accept it. I had to fight. Not for him, not for the marriage. That ship had sailed, sunk, and was rotting at the bottom of the ocean. I had to fight for myself, for my dignity, for every single moment and sacrifice I had poured into our life. I had to make him pay, not just financially, but in the coin of his own arrogance. The midpoint shift. It happened somewhere between that rainy night watching the house and the first meeting with the lawyer. I knew I needed help, but not the kind most people get for a divorce. I didn't want to just divide assets. I wanted to understand how he was doing this, how he planned to cut me out, and how I could use his own methods against him. I needed someone sharp, discreet, and unconventional. I found her through a whispered recommendation, an old contact who knew someone who handled complex, messy, white-collar type divorces where assets were hidden and spouses were blindsided. She was nothing like the stuffy lawyers I'd imagined. Claire was sharp-eyed, direct, no nonsense. She listened patiently as I laid out the tangled mess of financial records, the secret transfers, the P.O. boxes, the shell company, the address of the house. When I finished, the silence stretched, thick with the weight of it all. "He's not just having an affair," she said, her voice low and even. "He's committing financial fraud, at least against you. He's using marital assets to acquire personal property with a third party, concealing the source and the nature of the investment. This isn't just grounds for divorce. This is potentially criminal, depending on the specifics, and certainly gives us leverage." Leverage. The word tasted like cold, clean water after wandering in the desert. I didn't want him in jail. I didn't want my life further complicated by that kind of mess. But leverage I could use. "I don't want to negotiate," I said, surprising myself with a clarity and firmness in my voice. "I don't want a settlement. I want to stop this. To make sure he doesn't get away with it. To take back what he's trying to steal." Claire leaned back, studying me. "Okay," she said finally. "Stopping this before it happens, before the deed is recorded solely in his and her name. That's tricky. Especially if he's being this careful. But not impossible. We need to find the legal pressure point, the place where his plan is vulnerable." We spent hours together, sometimes in person, sometimes on encrypted calls, dissecting every detail I'd uncovered. Claire brought in a forensic accountant friend to look at the money trail. They uncovered more than I had: offshore accounts, complex transfer patterns, loans taken out against assets I didn't even know we had, all hidden under layers of corporate jargon and legal obfuscation. He wasn't just buying a house with her. He was restructuring his entire financial life to exclude me, planning to leave me with a fraction of what I was entitled to. The deepening crisis was the timeline. The closing date for the house was looming. He seemed increasingly confident, even cocky. He'd make comments about simplifying things, about future plans. Oblique references I now understood were about their future, their plans, built on the rubble of ours. He was humming around the house, lighter, happier than he'd been in years. The irony was a bitter pill. He was happy because he thought he was free, that he'd gotten away with it. While I was living in a constant state of high-wire tension, every phone call a potential disaster, every casual question from him a threat. My sleep evaporated completely now. The house, their house, haunted my thoughts. Would they spend holidays there? Would they host parties, invite friends we knew? Would they build new memories in a place built on my pain? The thought was unbearable. I had to stop them. The plan Claire devised was risky, audacious, and hinged on a specific, obscure aspect of state property law combined with a legal document he'd signed years ago without thinking. It involved a swift, silent legal filing, a preemptive claim on the property based on the demonstrable use of marital funds for its acquisition, coupled with leveraging a power of attorney he'd given me early in our marriage, before things got complicated, for managing some joint investments. It was broad enough, if interpreted correctly, to allow me to act on his behalf in specific, very limited financial transactions related to marital assets. The timing was critical. It had to be filed after their final loan approval, but before the title officially transferred at closing. It was a legal gray zone, a bold interpretation of the law, and dependent on the right judge or legal official seeing it our way. Claire explained it all carefully, laying out the risks. If it didn't work, if he found out prematurely, he could counterfile, tie things up in court for years, make my life hell. He could claim I was mentally unstable, that I was attempting fraud. The financial cost would be immense, win or lose. And the emotional cost, I was already hollowed out. Could I survive a prolonged legal war? But the alternative was letting him win. Letting him take our shared life and build a new one with her on its foundation, leaving me with nothing but the wreckage. The thought of that was worse than any potential legal battle. Worse than any public humiliation. The turning point was a Tuesday morning. I woke up, the same knot of anxiety in my stomach, the same exhaustion weighing me down. I looked around our bedroom, the room we'd shared for so long, and it felt foreign. It wasn't ours anymore. It was just a space. He had already left, probably for a secret rendezvous, another step in his plan. And in that moment, looking at the empty space beside me, I felt a surge of cold clarity. There was nothing left to lose. The marriage was dead. The trust was annihilated. The future I thought I had was gone. All that remained was the fight. For myself.
For the principle of it.
To make him face the consequences of his actions. I called Claire. "Do it," I said. My voice didn't tremble. It was steady, resolute. "File it." She didn't ask if I was sure. She just said, "Okay." The clock is ticking. Their closing is tomorrow at 2 p.m.
My team is filing the paperwork now.
It's a long shot, getting everything processed and registered in time, given how fast they're moving. But we'll push it through. The next 24 hours were an agony of waiting. Every phone call, every email, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I went through the motions of my day, a ghost in my own life. My husband came home, talked about his day, complained about traffic, completely oblivious to the legal storm gathering around him. I watched him, this stranger I had shared my life with, and felt nothing but a cold, empty space where love and trust used to be. Only the burning ember of determination remained. Claire called late that night. Her voice was tight with exhaustion, but there was a flicker of triumph in it. "It's filed," she said, "and provisionally processed. The key document, the one leveraging the power of attorney and citing the commingled funds, is attached to the property record. It creates a necessary legal obstacle for the title transfer. Because of how they structured the purchase, using his name primarily for the loan, despite the shell company for the deed, the title company, if they do their due diligence, has to address our claim. It throws a wrench in their plan. So, it worked? I asked, holding my breath. It's not a guarantee, she cautioned. They might try to push through, hoping we're bluffing or that the filing isn't fully processed. They might try to argue the power of attorney is invalid for this purpose. That's why you have to be there. With me. Physically present when they try to sign the final papers. We need to make it impossible for them to ignore. Physical presence. Facing him. Facing her. In that room. My stomach clenched. But there was no hesitation. This was it. The moment of truth. The next morning was surreal. I got ready like it was any other day, shower, coffee, dressing for work. But beneath the mundane surface, a hurricane raged. I didn't go to work. I drove to Claire's office. We reviewed the plan one last time. My role was simple. Be there.
Silent.
Let her handle the legal maneuvering. But my presence was the weapon. The unexpected variable. The face of the life he was trying to erase. We arrived at the title company 20 minutes early. I followed Claire, her movements calm and deliberate. The receptionist directed us to the conference room. I took the seat Claire indicated, my back to the door, facing the table, the empty chairs waiting to be filled. Then they arrived. The door opened, and he walked in first, looking relaxed, carrying a briefcase. She was right behind him, smiling, her hand resting lightly on his arm. They were talking, laughing softly. They didn't see me immediately. They were focused on the table, on the papers waiting to be signed, on the future they thought was just moments away. He took his seat, and as he turned, his eyes swept across the room, casual, expecting only the lawyer, the agent, the title officer. And then his eyes landed on me. The smile vanished. His face, in an instant, went from confident ease to utter, gaping shock. His eyes widened, flickered to Claire beside me, then back to me, scanning my face, searching for an explanation, a sign that this wasn't real, that I wasn't really here. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her smile faltered too, as she followed his gaze. Recognition dawned, then confusion, then a dawning horror mirroring his own. Her hand slid from his arm. The air in the room, already cool, seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The lawyer, who had just entered behind them, froze, sensing the sudden, violent shift in the atmosphere. The title officer looked up from his papers, bewildered. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. My husband just stared at me, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. And maybe in a way, he had. The ghost of the wife he thought he'd buried. Claire leaned forward slightly, her voice calm, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "Good afternoon," she said, addressing the room, but her eyes were fixed on the lawyer accompanying them. "My client is here regarding the property closing scheduled for this time. We believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding the title." The lawyer recovered first, though he looked deeply uncomfortable. "A misunderstanding?" he stammered. Who is your client?" My husband finally found his voice, a hoarse whisper. What is this?" Claire didn't look at him. She kept her gaze on the opposing lawyer. "This is Mrs. my last name," she stated clearly, using my married name, the name he was trying to discard. "And we have filed a claim against the property and potential ownership interest based on marital contributions. Furthermore," she paused, and I saw a flicker of something akin to dread cross my husband's face as he seemed to anticipate what was coming next, the part he couldn't possibly have planned for. Acting on her legal authority, granted by a valid and existing power of attorney, Mrs. my last name, has executed a new deed reflecting proper marital interest in the property, given the use of commingled funds and existing legal obligations. The title officer gasped faintly. The opposing lawyer's jaw dropped. My husband stared at me, his eyes searching, desperate. Claire reached into her briefcase and produced a document. "We have here," she said, her voice gaining strength, "the officially recorded deed for the property located at address of the house, reflecting the transfer of ownership." As you can see, she slid the document across the table towards the title officer and the other lawyer. They looked down at the paper. The room was absolutely silent now, the kind of silence that screams. I watched their faces as they read. The title officer's eyes widened in alarm. The opposing lawyer paled visibly, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of disbelief. My husband's gaze was fixed on the document, straining to see. He half rose from his chair, leaning over the table. He saw the names. He saw my name. Not his and hers. His, yes, but crucially legally tied to mine. And then below, the second, corrected deed, processed just this morning under the authority of the POA, transferring the full legal interest, reflecting the marital claim, placing the primary ownership interest in my name. The air seemed to rush out of him. The color drained completely from his face, leaving it a ghastly white. His eyes rolled back slightly. He swayed, clutching the edge of the table, his knuckles bone white. The briefcase he was holding clattered to the floor, papers scattering across the carpet. He made a sound, a strangled gasp, somewhere between a choke and a sob. And then, slowly, his grip loosened, and he collapsed. Not dramatically, not a sudden crash, but a slow, controlled crumple. He slid down the side of the chair, hitting the floor in a heap, his eyes still wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. The room erupted. The other woman cried out his name, rushing to his side. The lawyer fumbled for his phone, presumably to call for help. The title officer looked on in stunned silence. I remained seated, perfectly still. My heart was still pounding, but it was a steady drum now, not a frantic flutter. I looked down at my hands, no longer white-knuckled, just there. I watched the chaos unfold around the man who had tried to erase me. He had wanted to build a secret future, a hidden life, using my past and my resources. He had been so meticulous, so certain of his own cleverness. He thought he had covered every angle, hidden every trace. He never once considered that the foundation he was trying to destroy was stronger and smarter than he ever imagined. He thought I was passive, oblivious, easily discarded. The plot twist wasn't just that I showed up. It was how I showed up. He set up the legal structure for the purchase. He used marital funds, which made it subject to marital property laws. He, years ago, in a moment of trust or perhaps just laziness, signed a broad power of attorney giving me the authority to act financially on his behalf in certain circumstances. He thought by putting the deed in a shell company's name, he was untouchable. He thought by making the loan in his name, he was simply acquiring a personal asset. He never imagined I would uncover the tangled web of his financial deceit. He never imagined I would find a lawyer skilled enough to navigate the obscure corners of property law and marital rights. He never imagined I would have the courage or the cold fury to use the tools he had left lying around, the use of our shared money, the power of attorney he'd forgotten about, the very legal system he thought he could manipulate to turn his plan inside out. By filing the claim on the property, we forced the title company to acknowledge the marital interest before the closing could proceed cleanly. And by simultaneously using the power of attorney, I wasn't just claiming an interest. I was legally acting on his behalf to correct the ownership structure, transferring the primary ownership to me, reflecting the true source of the funds and the existing marital claim. It was a legal maneuver, a technical knockout, based on the rules he himself had inadvertently engaged. He didn't just lose the house to me. He legally facilitated the transfer himself, through my hand, using his own prior authorization. He had collapsed not just from shock, but from the sheer, undeniable proof that his carefully constructed plan had been his own undoing, using the very instruments he put into play. He lay there, a crumpled heap on the floor, surrounded by the scattered papers of the life he had tried to start without me. The woman knelt beside him, frantic. Their dream house, their secret future, lay in ruins around them, represented by the deed on the table with my name on it. The room slowly cleared. Paramedics arrived, murmuring questions. The other woman was crying, dabbing at his forehead. The lawyer spoke in hushed tones. I just watched, the cold satisfaction, a hard knot in my stomach, warring with a strange, profound emptiness. This wasn't a triumphant moment, not really. It was a necessary one, a severing. The end of a long, painful chapter. I left the room quietly, Claire by my side. No one tried to stop me. The drama had shifted, was focused on the man on the floor. Outside the building, the air felt different. Lighter, somehow. Or maybe I was just lighter, having shed the unbearable weight of the secret, the tension, the fear. In the aftermath, there was paperwork, of course. Legal formalities. The house was unequivocally mine. The court upheld Claire's filing and the validity of the deed executed under the power of attorney, given the clear evidence of marital funds being used. He didn't contest it. After that public collapse, after the humiliation, after his lawyer explained just how thoroughly he had been checkmated by his own actions, he seemed to lose the will to fight. The divorce was relatively clean after that, the financial settlement favoring me, acknowledging the extent of his deceit and the assets he had tried to hide or divert. The house. I visited it once after everything was finalized. Walked through the empty rooms, the same rooms from the online pictures that had tormented me. It felt cold, sterile, not like a home. It was a symbol, a monument to a battle won, but not a place of peace. I couldn't imagine living there. Building anything new within walls built on such betrayal felt wrong. I sold it.
Quickly.
Used some of the money for a down payment on a small condo by the water, nothing grand, just somewhere I could hear the waves. The kind of place we had dreamed of, only now it was just mine. The rest of the money, I invested it. Wisely. Securely. I took control of my financial future, something I had always let him handle. I learned about investments, about securing assets, about protecting myself. The paper trail he had left became my roadmap to independence. The bitter taste of betrayal still lingers sometimes, like a phantom ache. The years lost, the trust shattered, the naive belief in a shared forever. Those things leave scars. But beneath the scars, something stronger has grown. A resilience I didn't know I had. A fierce independence. A cold, quiet certainty that I can handle whatever life throws at me. He tried to build his future on my ruin. He used our shared past as currency for his secret desires. But the foundation was faulty. It was built on lies, and lies eventually collapse. Sometimes, the structure you think you're building is just a facade, easily taken over by the person you tried to leave behind, especially when they come armed with the truth, a good lawyer, and the legal tools you carelessly left within their reach. The silence I live in now isn't empty. It's quiet. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like it belongs entirely to me. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.